Welcome, Todd. It's a pleasure to have you on AWS Milwaukee's Meetup 10-minute POV. Appreciate
Thanks,
the
Chip.
time.
Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I've always been intrigued with what you've been doing as a firm, as an advisory firm for quite a while. And I was really hoping if you could do us a favor and just give us a little of your background, professional background, and
Mhm.
how you were able to thread all those experiences together to come up with really one of the most compelling advisory firms that I know of in this area that has a tremendous amount of influence on everything from Industry 4.0 and really the move to 5.0, workforce development, supply chain management, and all the innovations that are really spinning up in and around that in a multitude of different industries. So if you could do us a favor and just walk us through that story for starters.
Y- Yeah, sure. It's pretty simple. I grew up in the software industry. Started an advisory firm after we exited a company several years ago now, and I was focused on top line growth for small and medium sized businesses primarily, and then found myself in an opportunity to work directly with some leaders in a global 25 electronics firm, and was part of their sort of transformation effort. And then I started understanding all of the different points of intersect as it relates to Industry 4.0 and the people side of things, the upskilling, reskilling, and new skilling that will be required. And that got me involved in deeply into higher ed, especially in the two-year colleges. And ultimately, it came down to building collaborative ecosystem frameworks to help companies work more closely together to achieve a few business outcomes like lower investment points, better access to subject matter experts that they couldn't achieve on their own, and better access to best practices, because when 10 companies are getting together to implement a data analytics project, for instance, or a pilot, there's just a lot more learning that goes on just because of inclusion of thought and the volumes of data that you can react to.
Excellent. Excellent. I think one of the things that intrigues me is your ability to really adapt an incredible amount of depth and through research and through experiences in addressing things that are really top of mind. And obviously, we're at what do we call this? A safer at home quarantine at this
Yeah,
point in
right.
time. It'll be interesting to go back 6 months from now and watch this discussion to see how things have actually changed. But
Yeah.
there's been some recent additions to your firm that really center on optimizing the workforce in a remote environment. And I'd
Mhm.
love to hear some of the things that you've put together in this body of work.
Sure. I mean, we're just simply an example of a really small firm that has had to pivot a little bit because there's a little less interest right now in the implementation of technology, emerging technologies from the fourth industrial revolution. Right. It's so many of those projects are on hold. So I've probably done as much research in the last 30 days than I did in all of 2019. Really, just coming up to speed on global perspectives as it relates to COVID-19. Managing a suddenly remote workforce, the leadership mindsets that are required in order to manage effectively, and sort of a how do you want your leadership to style to be remembered 6 months from now? I think that's a really sort of compelling question for people to answer for themselves. The I look at research that's aimed at the largest companies in the world and scale it, aggregate it, synthesize it, scale it back, and try to apply it to small and medium-sized enterprises so that we can provide frameworks. I don't think it matters too much if you are working on Industry 4.0 projects, workforce upskilling and retention projects, or COVID-19 response, recover, and thrive. I think they all require and they benefit from an underlying operating system that you can install in your own business, whether it's truly individually as an organization and as economic regions, the more often we can apply frameworks and proven models, the better chance we have for predictable positive business outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
So we've just taken a bunch of the research that the largest firms have done for the largest companies and scaled them down to be used by small and medium-sized enterprises, primarily in the Midwest.
Okay. How do you see, as you start to roll these interventions out into those small to medium businesses, what is their adoption of cloud-based solutions relative to your other experiences in the larger enterprise? Where are they on their adoption curve, and where does that intersect business value in the understanding of what they have in terms of business outcomes?
So I want to think about that in terms of three different horizons, right? The McKinsey 3-horizon model. But instead of thinking about it as our core business adjacencies and then disruptors, I want to instead apply that to responding to COVID. So how are we safeguarding lives and livelihoods right now of our employees? How are we planning for business continuity? Secondly, recover. The second horizon is recover. And that has to do with what have we learned and how do we emerge stronger? And then the third horizon is how do we thrive in the new normal, whenever that is, whatever that becomes. How do we position ourselves to gain market advantage based on the preparation that we're doing now? It's very difficult to actually have this conversation in what will be our second week in Safer at Home, right? Because many companies are still very focused on business continuity, financial viability, et cetera. Right now, I see cloud-based applications and infrastructures like AWS. We're doing this over Zoom, and I think Zoom runs on AWS, if I'm not mistaken. And thank God for Zoom and other products like it right now, because employee connectivity it's the one thing that is maybe a redeeming, not just employees, but just socially, right? The ability to, this is a poor replacement from sitting across from you at a table in a restaurant nearby. But it's not bad. It's a lot better than being on a speakerphone and so forth. And so just culturally, being able to keep employees engaged, to help them understand how important they are to your business and so forth. I think in Horizon 1, you're talking about these types of video conferencing solutions for connectivity. I think those companies that had already done a shift to cloud-based infrastructures like those from AWS, whether it be manufacturing and distribution and logistics companies or just traditional companies, the more cloud-based you are today as a business, the better position you're in to manage remotely right now, manage that business remotely. In Horizon 2, when we get to the recovery stage and we're talking more about how we can emerge stronger, I can see the connectivity being as important. I see many more companies quickly adopting cloud-based ERP systems and cloud-based back-end systems, not only because if this ever happens again, but because they recognize at this point that they put themselves at a disadvantage by not getting there as the rest of the world moved there. And then as we move to Horizon 3 and we think about thriving in the new normal, I can see many others see as well an evolution here. We have spent decades talking about the risk of revenue concentration, yet we kind of missed the fact of the manufacturing concentration that was going on in China and other parts of Asia. Much of that will be diversified geographically to European, Latin American, and North American markets. And so you'll see a localization of supply chain, connected systems like 3D printing systems, connected systems like CNC, and then this emerging business model of manufacturing as a service, where I'm either subscribing to manufacturing services, in other words, shared time for the manufacturing infrastructure, all of which can be managed on an AWS backend, or I'm literally having the lighthouse manufacturers, the highly capable contract manufacturers in the world, coming into a region and standing up manufacturing facilities, and I'm subscribing to their services to do that system integration, and they're either cutting that over to me immediately or running it in perpetuity for me.
I like it. And what do you think, based on your experience again and everything that you've seen, what do you see are some of the, maybe let's say the biggest threat that as a result of what we're going through right now and the transition and the rate of innovation that's taking place in a remote environment and a connected, interconnected, OS-based set of systems, what do you think is the biggest threat to those organizations that are just not connecting the dots?
Well, I think the threat is we have to be very sensitive about the near-term viability of these companies, right? And their employees' ability to get paid and so forth. I mean, that can't be understated. There will come a time, and it will vary by business, where there's it's not necessarily a pivot to phase two, it's more of an overlap. So the horizons 1 through 3, they're very condensed. And the more mature, the more capable your organization is, the faster you can start focusing on 2 and 3. In an ideal world, you'd have small teams who are focusing on some of that right now, a core team thinking about the immediate response, small teams thinking about 2 and 3. That's not practical for everybody and every size of company, but the real risk is not transitioning the thought process in time, spending so much time digging out of one that you can't see what's coming next and losing significantly more competitive ground because of it.
I like it. So clearly an inflection point. So I can't thank you enough, Todd. This has been absolutely incredible to have you invest 10 minutes of your time just to give us some of the insights that you've come across, particularly at this point in time. Is there any parting words that you have for us?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks, Chip, for including me in this project. I think it's a great initiative that you've got to keep people engaged and informed. I think from a parting word standpoint, regardless of what horizon you're working on, this is all about people, right? So I think employee well-being, your connectivity, the tools that are in place from AWS and other vendors to connect to your people, it's the #1 issue right now. I can't imagine the impact, the level of volatility in the workforce that's coming, right? There are all the rifts that are going on right now that are necessitated by the finances, but there will be a lot of unemployed people and a lot of open jobs whenever that time comes. And your ability to be purpose-driven and to connect to your remote workforce right now will significantly enhance your ability to be concerned about their well-being, to be concerned about their development during this time, to make sure that they're in a great place. That will completely change the lens with which you can look back from 6 months from now.
Brilliant. Again, thank you so much. Now, big question. Would you be willing to come back and do an encore?
Yeah, I'd be happy to anytime. Just shoot me a note.
I appreciate it very much.
All right,
We'll
Chip.
talk to you soon.